Gotta do the don't go about the mess. It's TSM, one step at a time, breaking the chains that held me blind. I'm learning to live, finding my way, step by step. I'm breaking away with every pore. I'm claiming my life. It's TSM, I'm ready to thrive. Yeah, it's TSM.
Well, here we are. Hi, Bruce.
I love that tune.
Yes, so catchy. Isn't it? We don't see him in Australia. He did.
Sorry, I missed you on the audio on that one.
Oh, his name is Sam. He's out of Australia. He used AI to create it, but I think he wrote the lyrics and put everything together. Yeah, it's well done.
Yeah, and the video of the beach is nice and everything else. So it's good.
Yeah. Well, welcome. Welcome to folks who are joining. Great to have you here. We're streaming on several different platforms. So wherever you're joining from, whether YouTube, Facebook, X, and Instagram, wonderful to have you guys here. It's been a little while since Bruce and I have done one of these Q&As, but they're usually really fun. We're really here to answer your questions that you have about the Sinclair Method. He and I have both been working in the field for, I think I'm going on like 7 years now. How long have you been working in the TSM world, Bruce?
6.5.
Wow.
You must be a little bit longer because it was your meetings that I went to at silly o'clock in the morning in the early days.
You're like, I'm going to learn about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started doing videos in 2017 when I started the treatment. And I think I started coaching people in 2018 and hosting groups, if I'm recalling correctly. Yeah.
So yeah. Well, that brings back memories, doesn't it?
I know. Time goes by so fast. Before we jump in, I just want to invite you guys again, those of you who are here, if you have questions about the Sinclair Method, feel free to drop them in the chat. We will do our best to get to all of them. Typically, we can. But I was curious to hear, Bruce, just to kick things off, because people often ask me, I'm sure you get the question all the time with Rethink Drink in the UK, why isn't the Sinclair Method more well known? Like, why didn't I hear about this in rehab or AA, or I've been struggling for years or decades? Why isn't it more well known? And you and I have been working in the space now for 7-ish, 8-ish years or whatever. What are your thoughts on, number one, why it's not more well known, and number two, have things changed since you started working in this field as far as awareness?
Have things changed is a good question. Because I thought when 6.5 years ago here in the UK, I thought by now this would be everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And I thought everyone would be on TSM now that was struggled with alcohol, and it would all be on the road. And has it changed? Yeah, definitely changed. It's definitely moved on from where it was 6 years ago, 6.5, 7 years ago. Still not even close to where it needs to be, not even close to it.
Yeah.
But I think there's so many different factors that are causing it, and none of them I don't think are deliberate. I don't think that they are. I don't think there's any big, heavy, deep conspiracy with it. I think there's just a whole bunch of factors that come together. Things like naltrexone is out of patent, so therefore there's no benefit for pharmaceuticals to push it. It's not the pharmaceuticals that are stopping it. It's just that they don't push it.
Yeah.
Here in the UK, the main medical system, the National Health Service, the NHS, they don't tend to promote it because it needs to be prescribed what we call off-label here in the UK. And it needs in the UK, it has to be prescribed with a support program, and we are the only organisation here in the UK that gives a proper one-to-one support program, like you guys do in the States. But we're the only people that do a genuine support program here. So there's a number of different things, but I think in time, will it change in time? I think it's going to be something that is built from a grassroots level. Yeah. When there becomes enough knowledge and enough experience, or enough testimonies and stories about the success, before it'll get to a certain level, and then it will just go boom, I think. But when's that going to happen? I don't know. That could be another 5-10 years at least, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's like one single like entity suppressing it necessarily. It's like a bunch of little things, excuse me, all combined that are preventing it from gaining traction from lack of awareness with general practitioner doctors who could potentially be prescribing it to people who are already assessing people, their drinking and how much they're drinking and things like that. I still hear stories every week of people who try to get it from their doctor here in the US, and the doctor refuses or makes them feel like a terrible person for even asking or things like that. And yeah, treatment centers are not, I think treatment centers here in the US at least are prescribing it as people are leaving for like an anti-craving medication, but they're certainly not supporting drink reduction. Obviously, they're strictly abstinence based. Um, yeah, because it's generic and there used to be a black box warning on it, which in the US that means like danger. This medication is like the black box warning was around the liver damage of naltrexone, because there was a misunderstanding that the medication caused like severe liver damage, but we now know that's only in extremely high doses, and so that black box warning was removed. But I'm surprised that some people still believe there is a black box warning on it, or that it's still really damaging for the liver. So I think there's a lot of little things that have kind of just created a lot of resistance to it really taking off.
Yeah, I think it's starting to change. I mean, it's, and I think in America as well. I think you're further ahead than we are in the UK. The advance in the States is much easier to get it.
Yeah.
Someone has said that their doctor prescribed it. I don't know if that's the UK or the States.
But didn't know
One or
about
two
TSM.
one or two doctors here in the UK will do it if they've got in-depth knowledge of naltrexone. But I don't know what's like. Again, I don't know what's like in the States. But here in the UK, if a doctor prescribes it for the Sinclair method, then you know as well that it has to be taken alongside alcohol for that process to happen. Now, for a doctor to do it in the UK, he has to know that that person's getting the proper support. Otherwise, they're basically prescribing a medication and saying, "Hey, listen, you can carry on drinking,"
Mhm.
and it puts the doctor at risk. Not risk, but what's the word?
They're just not comfortable kind of.
Yeah, just not comfortable doing it. So,
Yeah.
but when you get a doctors who understand the process in the UK, we've got probably one of the best in the UK, and understands the medication, understands the process, and we've worked with them for 6.5 years, so
Yeah.
they know that we offer the proper support, the one-to-one support, and a program as well, and videos and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, it will come. I just hope that it doesn't grow into something where it's just get the pill, get the pill, get the pill, get the pill, and it's
Mhm.
where it's there's definitely the emotional psychological side that needs supported as well. So.
Yeah, I actually wanted to bring that up next. And again, just welcome to folks who are joining. Sean, thank you for your comment that your doctor prescribed it but didn't know about TSM. I hear that often, that the doctors will be willing to prescribe but can't really provide much else support regarding TSM or what to expect or timeline or even dosing or redosing and things like that. But something I wanted to ask you about, Bruce, and again, for those who are here, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We're here to answer any questions you have. But as I've been working in this space, since 2018 or so, and more particularly with Thrive since 2021, I've really observed a trend with people who are on the Sinclair method. And I'm curious if you've seen the same and just your thoughts with it. As you know, we've kind of broken the Sinclair method into 3 phases of the method, kind of the starting out phase, the middle phase where you're working on habits and mindful drinking and alcohol-free days, and then the latter phase, the 3rd phase, is like heading toward extinction and life free from alcohol use disorder. But I just see this trend, not with everyone, but with a lot of people, where they start the treatment, they're super enthusiastic, they're super motivated. Maybe they're even seeing a significant change in their drinking in the first month or 2. And then a month or 2 in, they kind of hit this resistance or this plateau where they realize, okay, I see what naltrexone is doing, but I realize like I've got to do my part. Like we say, meet the medicine halfway, change habits, lifestyle coping skills, and things like that. And oftentimes they'll hit this plateau point, this phase 2, and they'll just kind of get discouraged. Maybe they'll continue taking naltrexone, but they're not really doing much else. Their excitement can kind of fizzle out. Their motivation can fizzle out. they realize they're drinking out of habit, but maybe they don't really care, or, they're just not motivated to do much else. And for me, it's like understandably so, especially if like you started it super enthusiastic, but then like reality sets in and you realize there's more than just taking a pill, before drinking to fix this issue. There's a lot of deep inner work that needs to be done, habit changes, coping skills, things like that. So I just can't help but observe this pattern with people. It's like they start out enthusiastically, and then when the reality sets in that there's more work, they can feel discouraged and maybe just kind of coast along for a while. And I personally think there's a lot that can be learned in that, but I just see how people can feel frustrated and discouraged. And I'm just curious if you observe that in people you work with, and just if you have any thoughts or advice or insights into that journey that so many people experience on TSM.
Yeah, I think just what I said a second ago. I think the biggest danger moving forward with the Sinclair method is the availability of naltrexone. And that sounds crazy because that's what we want. But the longer that I'm involved in the process, the more that I'm working with clients on a regular basis. I mean, I'm currently working, I believe, with probably about 60 clients at the moment. And we've done it for years. And like yourself, you work with a lot of clients of one-to-one with coaching and everything else. And you start to learn very, very quickly that it's not just about supporting someone to say, listen, just keep taking the meds, keep taking the meds, keep taking the meds. Now, I believe that there are some people out there that does work for. And I've started to compartmentalize, if that's the word, the sort of people where that's working very well for.
Yeah.
There are a percentage, and I would say it's probably around about 30% of people in that kind of range where the medication alongside a period of time will be sufficient for them. But there are, I would say 70% of people need support, they need encouragement, they need, there are so many different variations that if someone is just given a medication and told to get on with it, there are so many questions that come up, like what do I do on holiday? What do I take? How quickly do I reduce? I drank more last week than I did this week. I had a day when I drank a little bit more. The number one danger is that if someone is drinking quite high and they start reducing too much too quickly and they go into withdrawals, let me just give you one quick example. We had a client just recently who started on the medication. He was drinking 24/7, and we slowly started moving back his start time, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. When it got to 11 o'clock, he phoned me up one day and he said, Bruce, I'm hallucinating. I'm seeing things that I feel like I'm about to bounce off the roof. I'm really high as a kite. And I'm thinking, right, whoa. And my background was rehab center management. So I've worked with DTs and things before.
Yeah.
And I said, you need to go and drink immediately. Go and have a drink immediately. And so he did that. We spoke to our doctor, who, like I said, is one of the best in the country. And the doctor said, did he take my advice in regards to his ADHD medication? And please, for anyone that's listening to this, the doctor had done a full medical assessment with this client and had suggested to lower the ADHD meds. So what then happened was he hadn't done that. He was still taking his meds. They had given him the meds at the level that he was drinking at. So when he started to reduce the drinking, he was high as a kite on his ADHD meds.
Oh, wow.
He wasn't withdrawing. Now, if he had been working on his own without me going, hang on a minute, there's a problem here, and then getting the doctor involved who knew everything from the medical point of view, then that could have been a completely different scenario.
Wow.
So that's just one example of hundreds and hundreds of the fact that people need encouragement, people need support, the guilt, the shame that people go through. Sometimes people need to say, listen, you're doing okay, this is normal.
Yeah.
Where you're at, it's okay. So, but I'm sure you'll get it in the States, don't you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, to be honest, even on my own journey, I just wanted to isolate because my drinking like made me be a person that wanted to just be alone and drink however I wanted to. So when I was trying to fix this issue, I didn't want to like publicize it, especially the early days when I was trying to get naltrexone. I was refused 5 times by different doctors. And so I had more shame around it. And I almost felt guilty for doing the treatment because all these so-called experts were like, you should go to you should go to rehab, or you need detox before going on this. So when I finally got the prescription, I didn't even tell my husband. I just did it all on my own, saw some progress, but a few months in, and I relate so much with that journey so many people go through on TSM, where like you're excited, you're trying it out, you see some progress, but then a few months in, reality hits. Because for me, I started to feel less numb a few months in. Emotions started to surface, memories that I had honestly forgotten about. I remember starting this treatment just thinking, I'm just someone who likes to drink, and this medication will help me drink less, which was true to some extent, but there were also deeper reasons why I drank. And memories that I wasn't aware that I was suppressing with alcohol. I was numbed out every day. I couldn't feel things that a normal human should be able to feel. So that's when I started seeing just a therapist in my town to kind of work through some of these things. I had to leave a job. I took a couple months off work just to kind of like come to terms with this kind of new version of myself I was stepping into. If I really wanted to let go of this toxic relationship with alcohol, there was a lot that I had to work through in order to do that. Had I not done that, I could just see that I was drinking out of habit, drinking to cope, drinking in that kind of unhealthy way still. And it just hit me one day. I was like, if I really want to be a normal drinker, that means like I'm not running to alcohol after a crummy day or a tough emotion, or just because I'm mad and I want to numb out. Like normal drinkers don't do that. They have control over alcohol. Maybe they have a couple drinks with dinner at a party. It's not like a coping tool necessarily. So that hit me one day, and that's when I realized it was definitely more than a medication, and started getting the extra support. So I totally agree. And the people I've observed who just use naltrexone and then they're fine and they're healed in 3, 6, 9, 12 months, typically those are people who've been working at this for a long time, and maybe they're not drinking every day. They've got a lot of moderate drinking skills already, or mindfulness around their drinking, or they have healthier coping skills. And I hear them say naltrexone was just like the missing component or the missing link. So I agree. There's some that they just take naltrexone and they're good to go. But I think for most of us, there's more to it than just, taking the pill alone.
And I think that point as well, Katie, is absolutely, that's nailed that thing right on the head. And it's the people that I've noticed that haven't needed the support structures and support side of things are people that have had long periods of abstinence over the last 3-4 years through abstinent-based programs or through just stopping and drinking.
Yeah.
And they've done a lot of the internal, emotional, psychological work already, but they just can't sustain their sobriety. So like you said, they just need the medication.
Mm-hmm.
But there are very few that are in that kind of scenario. So it's...
I see Neil's question here, and I know what you're talking about, Neil, so I'll read this. He says, in a couple of videos from a few years back, you mentioned aiming to start with taking naltrexone and drinking for the first 30 days. I think you only lasted 4 days, then switched only to taking it when you wanted to drink. In what circumstances is this approach recommended? So my doctor, who eventually, when I finally did get an naltrexone prescription, she was a TSM doctor that I found through the C3 Foundation back in 2017. So her recommendation to me at that time, she specifically told me, try to drink every day for the first 30 days to essentially lay the foundation of extinction, like, taking naltrexone and drinking and not getting the same reward. And then from there, kind of listen to your urges, or she said something like that. But I remember clearly the first 30 days, try to drink every day. And for me, I was super excited about that because I was a daily drinker. It was very easy for me to drink every single day. And it was just cool that a doctor was like giving me permission to do so to some extent. But I remember 4 days in, like my 4th day, I just didn't have a strong urge to drink. The thought of drinking just didn't sound as appealing as it normally did. And so I had an alcohol-free day, and that it wasn't the most comfortable thing in the world, but I wasn't like white knuckling it. I was just like, okay, I'm not going to drink today. So that was what my doctor told me. Now I've worked with a lot of other TSM doctors since. Not all of them recommend that. Some do, particularly for people who are daily drinkers. You know, the invitation is just start taking naltrexone before you're drinking. Don't really force alcohol-free days in the first month necessarily. So I swear, and I don't know, Bruce, if you've seen this, but I swear I read a research paper somewhere where David Sinclair or somebody affiliated with him said something like, there's benefit to like having multiple extinction sessions in the beginning, meaning drinking on naltrexone, to lay that foundation of extinction, to start that process of, breaking the reinforcement of alcohol equals reward. And I haven't found that since, but I was like, I wonder if that was why my doctor told me to do that. Like, is there benefit to repetition of drinking on Nal in the beginning? Have you heard anything to that effect, or what are your thoughts there?
I haven't heard it. We have done it and proven to be very, very successful in certain scenarios, very specific scenarios. The standard protocol is take your pill, wait an hour, and drink. Now, if binge drinking, I was speaking to a guy today he's a binge drinker. So for what we do with a binge drinker is we will start someone on the medication for, let's say they're drinking Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and a Monday on a big binge and a big blowout, and then they're not drinking for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
What's causing that big blowout is actually the period of abstinence, because the brain becomes addicted to the endorphin. When you remove the endorphin, it creates craving. When someone's binging, they're not drinking for 2 weeks. The craving is building for those 2 weeks. And when they have a drink, whoosh, and then they go on a bender.
Yeah.
So what we do with binge drinking is we will start them on naltrexone, take it an hour before you drink. We will give them 2 or 3 binges and just assess the level of control that they get with the naltrexone on the binge. Once we get a level of control with that, in that scenario, we would then flip it on its head, and we would actually introduce alcohol in between the binges. So not all day, every day initially. We would do it at the weekend or sometime where there's no risk of the binge affecting jobs or things. And we would then introduce alcohol in the middle week, so that it doesn't build up the craving during the 2 weeks. And then when that happens, we would then potentially, when there's a lot more control, it's all assessed as we go through it. And then we will get to a stage where we might say, listen, have a drink every day or every second day, because we're trying to break that oomph of the binge, which is created by the lack of drink. So there are certain scenarios where we would definitely do it. We had one client who was on the verge of relapse, and the doctor assessed it. The doctor spoke to the client. This is not a normal process, and it's not normally advised. But this individual was that close to relapse. So the relapse was going to happen. They were a very, very heavy drinker. So in that scenario, we said to them, take your pill and have 1 can of beer. And I was on the phone to them every day, take your pill, 1 can of beer, take your pill, 1 can of beer, pill, 1 can of beer. And I said, I want you to do that every day for a month, just nothing else. They did it for a month. And every day I was checking in, any craving, are you struggling? Is it white knuckle? Nope, no problem. At the end of the month, I said, right, now let's do it every second day. And then end of the second month, let's do it every third day. And now they're drinking 1 or 2 cans twice a week. But that was from a zero start, but that was under very specific situations.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you mentioned, just 1 can of beer, because sometimes people question, like, oh, if I'm taking the pill, I really got to like let it do its job, and having 1 drink isn't gonna be as effective as maybe having 3 or 4 drinks. I've just heard that on occasion, but in my experience, sometimes I would just take a couple of sips of alcohol after taking naltrexone. Like if I kind of lost my interest or didn't feel like drinking once the pill set in, this was longer, I was on the treatment, I would take a few sips. And my understanding is like, even those few sips, like my brain isn't getting the same reward from the behavior. Like those 2 sips are still effective in some degree with the extinction session. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I always say to people, if I'm trying to keep these explanations really short because I go off on one. AUD, alcohol dependency, is two things. One side is the addiction to the endorphin. The other side is the habit, the emotional side, the psychological side. So they're both very, very separate issues. Now, when you take naltrexone, it lowers the endorphin, it rewires the brain and removes the craving. It does all the neurological side for the addiction, 100% swallow a pill. The habitual side is what needs to be worked on constantly. Now, to change a habit, we need to be doing that change of habit more often than not. So when I'm working people through habitual change, let's say they're drinking four cans of beer a day, we'll do habitual stuff to bring it down to 2 cans or 1 can a day. When we're down at that level, and they come back and say, "Oh, I had 4 cans the other day, Bruce, and I've blown it." And I said, "You haven't blown anything." And I said, the difference between 1 can and 4 cans has nothing to do with what's happening in the neurological side of things. Whether it's, like you're saying, 2 sips or 1 can or 20 cans, the brain has still learnt whether I have 1 can or 20 cans, I'm still getting a lower reward, and it's rewiring the pathway. The difference between the 1 and the 20 cans is specifically habitual. So if you do that, I say to some of my clients, listen, if you're going out on Saturday, take a pill, go and crack on, have a good time.
Yeah.
And the next day, you'll just go straight back to the normal habitual routine. But if you're doing it once a week, a habit is changed by doing it more often than not doing it 100% of the time.
Yeah. Yes. And that's something that, again, the longer I work in this space, one of our coaches, I think, said it in this way where they called it like a tale of two extinctions. Like there's the pharmacological extinction, but then there's the behavioral extinction as well, or the habitual change. And I just know that that's true with TSM because I've worked with so many people and currently am who, like Nancy says here, let me read this real quick. Naltrexone alone, taken for 2 years, did not work. Only with Thrive, TSM, and counseling for childhood trauma am I able to see progress in my relationship with alcohol use disorder. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nancy, for sharing that. I hear from so many people who are religiously taking naltrexone, taking it correctly according to the protocol, but they hit a plateau and they will be very self-aware. They're like, I don't really feel like drinking because naltrexone is working in the brain, but they do it anyway. The behavior hasn't changed yet. And so it's like we start chipping away at the craving and the, compulsion to drink, and naltrexone's doing its job to interrupt the reward, but the behavior needs time to catch up with that. And that's where people like Nancy and others who've been on the medicine for months or even years, I see comments like this all the time, like, oh, it did nothing for me. I tried it and it did nothing. And I'm always super curious, like, what else did you do to meet the medicine halfway? How were you gradually changing habits, cultivating different coping skills, becoming curious about your beliefs about alcohol, really seeking out and pursuing other things that give you meaning in life. There's so much more to it than like, hey, I'm just going to take this pill and I'm going to be cured of alcohol addiction. Like we said, some people, that's all they need. But there's always this other component of changing lifestyle, behavior, healing from trauma and internal wounds. I mean, I don't think trauma is like the only thing. Like, I think that's just a piece of the puzzle. But yeah, I've seen that so often, like and I'm curious what you think about that. There being kind of like the pharmacological extinction that's working neurologically in the brain, but then the behavioral extinction as well. Because let me tell you one more thing. Like one of our members, they had thought they were at extinction. They were drinking like once a week, 1 to 2 drinks, like going chunks of time alcohol free, no problem. They were on the method for a year at that point. But then life got really, really challenging and threw them some really difficult circumstances. And they started to revert back into habitual drinking to cope with it. Still taking naltrexone and all that, but their drinking spiked back up. And they told me, I didn't really feel like drinking, but it's just kind of what I've done in those familiar situations, like stressful situations. So I would love to hear, Bruce, what your thoughts are on that.
The one area that I would love to mention, and it all ties in, is I get hammered for this one on some places.
You're laughing.
Well, I think, like you, Katie, the thing with this, Katie, is that when you work with as many people as we do, you know that something is working. And initially, we were just talking about social media and some of the stuff we get on social media. And initially, it really bothered me. But now, when you know that what you're talking about works, if you do this, this, and this, it works.
Yeah.
It starts to become second thing. But that's why I laugh a bit, and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, but I know that it works because that's what we do. We do it all day. I do it 13 hours a day some days at the moment, and it's and we know that it works.
Dang.
So it's like, anyway, going back to the behavior and the trauma side of stuff. I mean, this is something that I've learned from coming out of rehab center management and working on abstinent-based programs, and I always tone this down a lot because I can get really kind of wound up with it. But there is a lot of talk out there in social media and everything else that trauma is causing relapses, and it's all to do with trauma, and we've got to do all this deep seeking stuff and everything. The most important thing to understand is that everyone starts drinking for 1,001 different reasons. Some can be trauma. Some of it's childhood trauma. Some of it is PTSD for ex-military, ex-forces guys. It can be work. I spoke to a guy today. All his work scenario was out drinking with clients all the time. That's what's created it for him. Some it can be a divorce. Some it can be a marriage. But during that period of whatever it was, the reason why someone started drinking, the alcohol intake increased to cover everything from the drinking. During that period of time, you drink alcohol, it produces endorphin. During that period, the brain becomes more and more and more addicted to the endorphin. Now, once the brain becomes addicted to the endorphin, we now have two very, very separate issues. And abstinent-based models will try and deal with the neurological addiction issue by telling everyone it's an emotional psychological problem. And therefore there's something, and then the whole thing is turned around and pointed back at the individual, so that when 90% of people relapse that they do, it's all your fault. It's you haven't done this, you haven't done that. Now, let me just add a little bit onto the end of that, just from what Katie's been saying, is that naltrexone is a perfect solution to regulate the endorphin, and then thrive through ourselves. You can lower the amount of alcohol that you're drinking down to a controlled, sustainable level. Now, when it's at a controlled and sustainable level, if there is underlying issues, which that's what, again, why Thrive's so important, the support is so important, because that's the point where we have to make sure that a person is safe emotionally, psychologically, and physically. And at that point, if there is a need for counseling, for therapy, that's the time to do it. And the therapy at that point will be so much more successful and worthwhile because the person is not panicking about relapsing and craving and alcohol and everyone else. Sorry, Katie, that was a long.
No,
but it's
that's exactly right. It's like, for me, I remember I tried so many different ways to quit drinking before TSM, and all I wanted to do was drink every day. It was hard to make progress because I couldn't get beyond that burning desire that, I wanted to drink. It didn't get better. I was 6 months sober, the longest stretch before TSM, and it didn't get better. In fact, it got worse. And I was like counting, like, okay, am I going to relapse today? Like, is today going to be the day? It was just like white knuckling it truly. And it's interesting because I do believe we all have some level of trauma in our life, or just, things that happen to us that leave emotional wounds, big trauma, little trauma, whatever. And I certainly work through some of those things on TSM for me, but it's been interesting these last couple of years. I've worked through a lot of things from my past that I didn't really realize were operating under the surface still, but I've been able to heal those things like years after I healed from alcohol use disorder. Like, alcohol use disorder is long gone, way behind me, but I hadn't healed those, emotional wounds or whatever, which I feel like now this past year or so I've really worked through. And so that's just been on my mind lately, of like people who, like Gaber Mate, who I really respect and think he's amazing at what he does, but it's like the whole concept that he talks about is like, you got to heal trauma. We drink because we're traumatized. But I'm like, but I healed from that. And my quote unquote trauma wasn't healed when I healed from AUD. So I don't think it's like, you have to heal that first and then you can heal alcohol use disorder. You can do them simultaneously, or the AUD in my experience can be healed first. Yeah.
The other thing as well, sorry to interrupt, Katie, but the other thing that is absolutely fascinating with it is it allows the people who have a genuine, in rehab and places, when people were relapsing, 90% of people do, and you're constantly told there's something wrong with you, then you're constantly going into therapy. Now, when you go into therapy, you're opening up Pandora's box, and it has to be unopened in a safe environment with a trained therapist so it can be done properly. Now, if someone goes through that and then opens up Pandora's box, it brings up all the emotions, and they've still got a craving for alcohol, and they relapse, then you've opened up Pandora's box, it's wide open, and now they're drinking heavily again. So in fact, it can create a lot more damage, and abstinent-based programs are constantly telling people it's your fault, there's something wrong with you, you need to do, but the beauty of the Sinclair method is that we regulate the endorphins and everything else, and that creates the safe for people. Like you said, everyone, my wife's a counselor. I believe in counseling till I'm blue in the face. And I think everyone can get counseling for life situations, but the life situations are emotional and psychological, and that can help alongside the process. So people can then get the counseling and therapy, but they're not going to relapse because it's all under control with naltrexone. So you can heal the whole person with naltrexone and support, which is why we say it so often. The support is really urgent, important, but the support is there because Katie, myself, Katie's coaches, our coaches, we can see, right, okay, something's coming up here regularly. We need to get you some professional support.
Yeah.
Now, if someone's just taking a pill, that's going to be missed completely, and it can be more damaging than it is good.
Yeah. Yeah. And something that, I found helpful personally, just like a quick anecdotal tip that I found really helpful on my TSM journey was, as the craving started to quiet down and I would feel an urge to drink, because the longer I was on TSM, I realized there was a distinction between a genuine craving, like where my brain was craving the endorphin. It's like, okay, it's time to drink because I have this craving and I need to have an extinction session, meaning drinking on now. But then also the urge to drink that came up because of a certain emotion or a time of day or whatever was going on in my life, which I saw those as two different things. Like, is this a genuine craving, or am I just thinking about drinking and getting a desire to drink because of something that's going on? And so I found it really helpful, like in that moment when an urge would come up before taking naltrexone, I would ask myself, what need do I have right now that I'm turning to alcohol to meet? And I would try to make myself identify the need. Am I bored? Am I sad? Am I feeling angry and I want to numb that out? Just starting there by understanding the reason I was drinking helped me see all of the ways that I was habitually drinking or drinking to cope. And I started practicing different ways to meet those needs in ways outside of alcohol. Like, I'd be like, okay, I can drink later, but let me do this thing first. And I'd spend, I don't know, 30 minutes or an hour doing something else, trying to meet that need that I had in a different way, other than just going to alcohol. And I found that was really helpful for me to learn other coping skills, learn other habits that were meeting the needs that I'd been habituated to turning to alcohol for. And what I often found in those instances, and I think like what you and I are talking about, with the habitual and behavior change side of this process, it's like, it's still very easy to drink on naltrexone out of habit. I think, we've kind of talked about that. Like, it was easy for me to like, oh, I'm bored, I'm going to drink. Oh, I'm mad, I'm going to drink. It took effort for me to pause and be like, wait a second, like, is this a real craving, or is this just something I've done for 10 years and I'm responding in this default or familiar way? So I just say that for people to realize, like, practically speaking, in one instance, what it looks like to meet the medication halfway. And some of the, mindful drinking work or, habit change work that Bruce and I are talking about, because even on naltrexone religiously, like what Nancy said, it's like, you can take the medication, be perfect at it, all of that, but still feel like nothing is changing. And that's where we have to really work to change habits and behaviors, especially if we've been drinking this way for years or decades. That is such an ingrained habit and response, and it's almost automatic that we do it. And so it takes time to kind of really think about, why am I drinking and what else could I do? And let me try this. And it takes intentionality and awareness and planning. It does take work, but what's great about TSM is it can be done, gradually, little by little. It's not like a overnight thing or anything like that.
Can I ask you a couple of questions that I always ask you, and I know exactly what the answers are, but they're kind of loaded. But I think it's important that other people hear it.
Yes.
2 questions. How often do you drink now? And is there a difference between the level that... Well, answer that one first, and then I'll ask you the second one.
So I don't drink anymore. I know you know that. I haven't drank since like September, I think, of 2018. I don't remember the last day because I wasn't planning to quit drinking. But just after that night, I remember it very clearly. I didn't drink again after that. I think it was August or September of 2018.
And then the second question, which is what fascinates me from coming from rehab world, where when people stop drinking, there's an ongoing craving, and there's this ongoing living. We in the UK will say that they've got the fingertips on the cliff, they're hanging on for dear life.
Yeah.
Do you find it is there a difference between abstinence, sobriety, and your sobriety at the moment, is the question, I think.
Night and day. It's not like, I tried to quit drinking so many times before TSM, and like I said, I made it 6 months one time. And so I know what it's like to white knuckle sobriety. I didn't understand at the time that sobriety could increase my alcohol cravings. I just thought I was crazy. Why do I want to drink every day? Like, I quit drinking, what's going on? And so being sober before TSM, first of all, my outlook on life, it just seemed like the rest of my life would be gray and boring, because alcohol, now I know, like, my brain had changed. My brain had been prioritizing the reward from alcohol, and everything else paled in comparison to it. So even if I went on an amazing vacation, my brain was still looking for the reward from alcohol, which was way above the reward the vacation was giving me. So I just remember my outlook on life. I'm like, life seems so boring, like, without alcohol. The urge to drink was there every day. I kind of threw myself into working out and fitness, which was good. But I also kind of had an eating disorder at that time, which was not good. But that was kind of like my distraction. But there's only so much you can do in a day with working out and fitness and healthy eating to, like, distract yourself. I tried to find other hobbies, get into different spiritual practices. But, I would go to, like, a spiritual meeting, for example, and I'd be like, oh, I just want to drink. Like, I just want to drink. And so that mental chatter never left me. And it seemed like the longer I went, I was like kind of convincing myself, oh, maybe I can drink again one day. I've gone this long. But then, sobriety through TSM, like I said, I didn't even mean to go sober. I just drank one time for the last time and never drank again, because month after month went by and I just wasn't interested in drinking. And now it's been almost 7 years of not drinking, and I don't miss it. I don't want it. I can drink if I want to. I just choose not to because it doesn't sound good. There's no craving. There's nothing. I just don't care about alcohol anymore.
Does it make a difference that you can, if you ever got to that point of, like, a life situation or scenario, that you could have a drink if you wanted to?
It does.
Yeah.
I like that it's not a forbidden fruit. I like that the option's on the table. And I know that if I were to drink again, I would maybe have 1 or 2. Like, I probably wouldn't be able to have more than 2, because I just know toward the end of my drinking on TSM, I couldn't drink more than 2 drinks. Like, for the last several months, it was just, I'd get this off switch that would prevent me from drinking more. So, yeah, I like that it's an option, and it almost makes it easier not to drink because it's an option. Like, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it later, or maybe on this occasion. But it just, in every environment or situation I've been in, because I've thought about it, I'm like, should I drink in this setting or on that setting or here or there? And I'm like, doesn't really add anything to it. Like, I don't really have a desire for a buzz. I prefer to be clear-headed now. I don't want my sleep to be interrupted. I'm perfectly happy with sparkling water or coconut water or Coca-Cola, or I just like I don't need something to alter my mind or feel that buzz, which is crazy to me because I loved an alcohol buzz. I loved it so much. So to just not have that desire for it anymore, or that desire to escape. When I used to drink, like when something bad in life would happen, it would be like, yes, I get to go to the store and get a bottle of whiskey and kind of have permission to like get myself wasted. And now to be in a place where something really bad can happen and it doesn't even appeal to me, the thought of getting wasted to cope with it. And again, that's not just because I took naltrexone and everything was perfect. I worked through a lot of stuff. I had to learn different coping skills and, question my relationship with alcohol and why I was turning to it in that way. But it's so nice to not feel like you need to numb out when life is hard, because it's always going to be hard, right?
I find it just mind blowing, and it's just listening to that. It's just like,
I know.
Why wouldn't anyone want to do it?
I know. Even if someone, and I want to get to Sober Heathen's question because it's kind of related, where he's asking, what would be the comparison of people who end up in abstinence versus clients who end up in moderation with TSM? Do most end up in one category versus the other? Labels and categories are annoying, but it's what we do. Yeah. So basically the question, like, do more people go abstinent through TSM or do more moderate? And I would say in my experience, most people go on this treatment to be a quote unquote normal drinker, and they define what that is for them, whether that's champagne once or twice a year or drinks on the weekend or drink a couple nights a week. Having control again over alcohol. I would say most people have that goal on the treatment and most people get there. Others like me, the longer they're on TSM, they opt for abstinence. For me, it was at a year. I have a success story on my channel I recently did. She was 4 years on TSM and just drinking less and less each year, to the point where she's like, I don't really know if I want to drink anymore after 4 years. So I think there's a lot of people who, like, I would say most people start the treatment with a goal of moderation, and then they're surprised as they progress through the treatment that they're like, actually, I'm questioning whether I want to drink anymore or not. And I couldn't say a percentage. I'm actually gathering data right now for a survey, so maybe I will have more like stats on that, whether people are abstinent or drinking moderately through TSM. But yeah, most people have a goal to drink moderately, but there's a significant portion, I don't know what it is, maybe 30, 40% of people who wind up quitting like I did. I don't know if you have thoughts on that, Bruce.
From the guys we've worked with, I think it's between 90 and 95% of people that will carry on drinking to moderation. The people that do stop, I used to ask everyone when they started, what's your goal with the TSM? And everyone else used to say, I want to just be sober, I want to not drink. But once people learn that it's very difficult for someone to understand who has no control over alcohol, what it's like to have control on alcohol. Mm-hmm. And when you have control over alcohol, then it's nice for most people to say, listen, I fancy having a drink. What we find, just like you, Katie, is that the people who do go to abstinence, I'm just trying to figure out, 99% of the time, it's not a planned specific, I want to be abstinent. Mm-hmm. They just get down to the lower levels and they go, like you, do you know what? If I have a drink tonight, I'm going to feel a bit groggy in the morning. I'll have a drink 2 days' time, or they'll have a week off or something. Yeah. And then they'll go, nah, I can't be bothered drinking again. So
yeah.
But I think a lot of the ones that go abstinent, it's not a deliberate, and that's something that really, really, I was going to say messes with people's head. That's the wrong expression, but it really is challenging for a lot of people who have been used to an abstinent-based program, because it's everything we're taught in that is, if you've got AUD, if you've got a problem with alcohol, the only solution is stop drinking and never drink again.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to get your head around the fact that someone that's drinking a bottle of scotch a day can actually drink in a controlled manner. Yeah. That's a hard one. I took me ages to get my head around that one.
And I'm sure you get those comments a lot too, like once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, like they can't drink in moderation. But that's coming from a place of just simple ignorance, not understanding the neuroscience of addiction and that it can actually be reversed and unlearned through TSM. But to your point, I remember when I first learned about the treatment, I was like, wait, would want to stop drinking after a second drink. Like I couldn't even conceive what that would be like, because for me, 2 drinks in, if you took away my alcohol, I would be mad at you. Like I just wanted to keep drinking. And so the concept of even truly being a moderate drinker, I couldn't wrap my own head around it when I started the treatment. It just was so impossible in my experience that it was hard for me to understand until I started walking through the treatment and experiencing it for myself. Like, whoa, this is real. This is really cool.
And Sean's asking, do you, now that you haven't drunk for so long, do you still take the medication?
Nope, I don't take it anymore because I was only taking it before drinking following TSM. I still have some on hand. So if I do drink again one day, I'll take it. But yeah, I haven't, the results have been permanent. And that's something that I think I was unsure about when I went on the treatment. Like once I reached extinction and just felt like I was totally free from this issue, I was like, is that going to come back? Like, or is this permanently gone? And the results have been permanent. In fact, they've just like probably reinforced more because I've gone so long without drinking that it just seems like another lifetime that I was a drinker and a heavy drinker. So the results now, if I were to drink without naltrexone, I would probably relearn it, in a month or a few months. So if I were to drink again, I would definitely take naltrexone beforehand. I wouldn't mess with that at all. So often I see people relearn it. I'm sure you do too, Bruce. Like if they drink without it.
Sorry, I've just read another question, and
Is it Lowell where he says psychobabble?
Fantastic question. Somebody called TSM psychobabble when I told them I was trying it. What's the polite response?
I love that you want to be polite.
I think in the early days I had the polite response. Now I just get so much stuff on TikTok from people that I'm losing my patience with people like that. The polite response is what's the polite response?
You're like, I have no recollection of polite responses anymore.
What's the polite response? Yeah,
Well,
it's a misunderstanding of what we do, and people have been so, dare I say it, focused. I was going to say brainwashed. That's the wrong expression. People have been so trained over the last 50, 100 years, hundreds of years, that the only solution is stop drinking and never drink again. So what I would say to people, Lowell, is that I would say when you drink alcohol, it produces a massive amount of endorphin in the brain. The addiction is to endorphin, nothing else. Why we drink alcohol is endorphin, the addiction is endorphin, and the relapse is endorphin. Please, please, please go to Google Scholar, not Google, because they'll just get bits and pieces. Go to Google Scholar, because in Google Scholar, you get the medical research papers and everything else. Go to Google Scholar and just research the biology of what happens when you drink alcohol in the brain, not anything else, but when you put alcohol in your body, biologically, what happens in the brain, and it produces endorphin. And then ask another question on Google Scholar: what is endorphin? How does it affect the body? And is it addictive? That's the big question. Is endorphin addictive? And just tell them to do the research, to do the scientific research. Sometimes if people just keep progressing on that school of thought, then it's like something, so you're never going to change their thinking on it. So where I'm looking for when I'm talking to someone, are they genuinely asking the question because they're genuinely serious, or are they there just to have an argument with you? If they're going to have an argument with you, walk away from it as quickly as possible.
Yeah,
because it will just go round.
I've had to learn that the hard way over the years, because we get some pretty nasty comments on social media, as you know, Bruce. And I would try to convince these people that it's not psychobabble. Like, here's research. And I've found no matter what information I present to people, they will not take it. Like, even if I'm literally showing hard scientific data or evidence from a study or success stories. Like they just don't want to hear it. And so, yeah, they just want to pick a fight. So for TSM, like sometimes we have to be careful with who we choose to tell, because like we don't want to be in a place where we're defending our recovery. Like we don't need to do that. And so Lowell, with you, I don't know if it's someone close to you who you really want to get on board and get their support. If so, I think Bruce's suggestions are great. You know, there's really simple ways to say it. Like, you know, well, you know, decades of research in medicine have shown that alcohol dependence is actually a learned behavior neurologically in the brain. And this treatment actually helps you unlearn it. Like that's a simple layman's way to put it. And there's so much research. There's even some good articles out there. Like I think on Very Well Mind, that popular website, they have a good article that dives into the Sinclair method that's pretty darn accurate about how it works and why it works. And there's more where that came from. But I've just found if someone is trying to insult you and they don't really want to learn, it's just not worth it to try to convince people, because their whole foundation of understanding what alcohol use disorder is and how it's treatable is based in antiquated information about it being like a disease or an allergy or a moral failing, when really, you know, I think nobody's perfect. We all have character flaws. You know, alcohol addiction is not a character flaw. It's more of like a learned behavior, like, you know, over time in the brain. So just having a simple one-liner, and if they want more, there's so much you can give them. The research and the information, it's all on your side. But yeah, it's not necessarily worth trying to convince people if they don't want to learn.
And can I ask a quick question as well? Sober Heathen, if you're still here, do you follow ourselves in the UK on TikTok? I think you do. And if you do, I would like to just say thank you very much for your support.
He's a wonderful gentleman if he is still here. He's one of those people who works in traditional recovery and recovered somewhat traditionally himself, meaning abstinence-based, but he's very supportive of TSM and naltrexone and alternative approaches.
It's just I'm looking at the picture, the names, and I'm thinking you put a lot of very positive, uplifting comments and support what we do on TikTok when I'm doing stuff. And if it is, I just want to say thank you very much. Really, really appreciate it. So,
yeah, it's nice to encounter people out there who are friendly, you know, because there can be such angry voices in this space.
Some people love us. And do you have Marmite or Vegemite in?
No, what's that?
No, it's something you get in the UK that's you either love it or you hate it.
Oh.
So it's the same with TSM. People either love us or they hate us. There's no in between.
Yeah, it's true. It's amazing to me, like, yeah, especially on TikTok, just because people are fairly anonymous and just the links they'll go to share their opinion on things. And there really is no convincing someone. I've just really learned that. Like, I've literally shown studies word for word what it says, and they're like, no, you're wrong. I'm like, okay, block you. Never mind.
And what I find really fascinating is that I still 6.5 years down the track, I still can't get my head. Well, I can because I was in that place initially, but when you've got something that works so well, I understand there's a lot of skepticism around it. Well, if it worked that well, everyone would know about it and everything else. Right. But you know what it's like, Katie. I mean, we work with Katie and ourselves. We work with hundreds, if not thousands, of people, and the success rates are client after client after client after client after client. Does it work for everybody? No, because what we've experienced, I'm sure Katie's the same, is that the program, if you stick to taking the medication compliantly and do the habitual stuff and get yourself plugged into a proper support program, I don't want to say what I'm thinking, but it works for the majority of people. Mm-hmm. And the only time we see it not working for people is because they stop taking the medication. Mm-hmm. And if you don't take the medication, the brain's going to get the huge reward and people are going to relapse. Mm-hmm. But there's honestly, and we have a laugh and a joke about it and everything, but Katie struggled with it for years. Matt, my business partner, he bottle of vodka. He was on the verge of suicide.
Wow.
The stories. I lost my dad. I spoke to a lady just before I came on here. Dad, her mum, her two brothers. She lost all of them with alcohol.
Wow.
And it just gets to the point when we know that today it is completely treatable. And it's not a character shortfall. It's not a personality issue. It's a medical neurological condition that's completely treatable.
Yeah.
I better shut up. Sorry.
No, you're preaching to the choir here. It's so true. And I just want to say too, is that, in our program, oftentimes I'll say, give this treatment a year for full results, just to have people in the mindset that like this takes time. Because some people start naltrexone and if they're not cured in 3 months, they're freaking out and they're quitting the medication. So I always like to give the year time frame. Some people get there more quickly. Others take 2 years, 3 years. We have someone in our program, they're almost 2 years in, and it was really slow and steady progress for them. But now that they're at the 2-year mark, they're healed. Like they're hardly drinking, they have control. But for that case in particular, it took them a year longer than they expected it to be, and they could get super discouraged and frustrated. But in the grand scheme of things, if someone's on TSM, like what's the other option for people? There isn't another better option. And if it takes you a year, if it takes you 2 years, if it takes you 3 years to reach your full goal, like there's not a rush to the end goal of this treatment. I always say that because like Bruce and I have talked about, there's a lot of healing and habit change and beliefs that need to be challenged and changed over time. And that doesn't happen, on a perfect timeline, and everyone is different. And so I never want to, articulate that, oh, you should be where you want to be at exactly a year or 6 months or whatever. Like everyone is truly different. And what I've seen for most people, even if they're not exactly where they want to be a year in, they're probably drinking at least 50% less. They're having alcohol-free days. They're feeling a lot better. They're seeing themselves have more control. Do they have more to go? Yeah, they have more to go. But keeping in perspective, like where you started and how far you've come, that is super important. I always say time is your friend with TSM. Like you don't need to rush to the finish line. Like you want to make sustainable changes, even if it takes you longer than you originally thought it would. But again, if you are getting support and guidance, like was it Nancy that said earlier, she was on the medication for 2 years and wasn't seeing a ton of success, but then she joined Thrive and started getting the support, started seeing a counselor, and that's where things started to change. So just be aware of that this treatment, it needs time to work.
And thanks for your comment as well, Neil. And it's if you're in the UK, yeah, give us a shout. Love to have a chat to you. But and just on that point of view, a story of one guy that I spoke to him this morning, 72 years old. He was drinking a bottle of vodka plus 6 to 8 cans of beer every day, and he'd been drinking that level since he was 20 years old. And he'd had a few periods of abstinence in rehab and stuff, but that was 54 years that he's been struggling.
Wow.
And he was the guy that I told you about, that was the relapse was going to happen. We started him on 1 can of beer a day, every day, and blah, blah, blah. Today I phoned him up, the happiest guy in the world. He's 74, and he said, Bruce, it's taken me 50 years to find this. 50 years. And that was a year ago. And he said, every time I speak to him, I said, how are you getting on? Fine. He had one day where he went and bought a quarter bottle of vodka, and he drank it, and his wife phoned me up panicking, and she said, he's drunk a quarter bottle, he's relapsed. I said, did he take his pill? And she said, yeah, he took his pill. I said, he's fine, don't worry about him. I said, just have lots of paracetamol ready for him in the morning. And I said, he won't do it again. And he's 50 years struggle.
Yeah.
And within the space of 2 months, it was pretty much, it's just incredible.
Yeah, part of the survey I'm collecting, I asked people if they would have known about this treatment sooner, would they have started it sooner? And of course, the majority of people said yes. It's like he struggled for 50 years, probably not knowing about this treatment, obviously, or he probably would have started sooner. Yeah.
And Lau, thank you very much. I was mentioning that to someone this morning, and I didn't know where about it was, but it's page 32. I'm going to write that down. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's like chapter 3, if I'm remembering correctly. I always remember the chapter, but not the page. Science may one day, or physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree, there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. I haven't memorized, apparently.
I love it. I love the fact that you've got it memorized.
I think I've said it a lot in videos, so I had to close my eyes to recall it. Yeah, the big book of AA talks about how, there's no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic, but science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. That's what the big book still says today, even though science started accomplishing this over 30 years ago. Yeah. So I don't know who's going to update the big book. Bruce, are you going to get on that?
Yeah, I think it's... I remember I did a post on Facebook, and I found 4 pictures of different. One was a car from 1935, one was a house from 1935, and one was something else from 1935. And then the 4th picture was alcohol, and or the recovery model for alcohol. And every one of them has changed dramatically since, except the model for alcohol.
Yeah.
And I get that. We get that completely. And we're not, if it's working for someone, listen, we support it 100%. But what you've got to understand is that Katie and I get a lot. The only abuse that we ever get on social media is from a very, very small percentage of a certain organization's people.
Yeah, with very loud voices.
Very loud voices. Majority of them are absolutely fine, and they do support what we do. But there's a very small percentage that we love them dearly, don't we, Katie?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, not here to convince those people, like I've realized. Yeah, that's okay. They're entitled to their opinions. And, if they're healed through that and they're convinced that's the only way, like, okay, that's totally fine. I don't want to change your mind. Yeah. So, and again, yeah, we never, like, my dad is sober because of AA. I'm glad the program exists. I'm not here to say it's wrong. If I've known people who went from TSM and back to AA and they're sober now, like, just TSM wasn't the thing for them. I'm like, okay, I'm not here to be like TSM is the only option. I just want to reach people who are suffering like I was, thinking that AA or abstinence was the only option. And that kept me stuck as long as it did. Yeah. I feel like if we had 100 options to offer people, one doesn't work, try this one. This one doesn't work, try this one. Like that's the ideal scenario.
I think the most dangerous thing that we can do in any form of recovery is when anyone finds a form of recovery that works for them, shout it from the rooftops. If it's AA, shout it from the rooftops. If it's standing on your head reciting the alphabet backwards, shout it from the rooftops. But just understand that it's not the fit for everybody. Right. TSM is not the fit for everybody. If it works for you, shout it from the rooftops.
Yeah.
Because there are millions of people worldwide who sitting right now, thinking, how am I going to ever deal with this? They've giving up. And there has to be hope out there for people. There has to be, whether it's TSM or anything. So.
Yeah. And I just want to say too, I know we're over time, but this just came on my mind because sometimes people who do TSM, especially if they have an abstinence background, like an AA or otherwise, they feel guilty that this treatment allows them to drink, or they feel guilty that they like that about the treatment, that like, oh, I like that this treatment lets me drink. And I just want to say, do the best you can to get out of that guilt-ridden mindset. Because like most of us, all of us, I would even say, who start this treatment, we really want to drink because our brain is addicted to the endorphin reward from the alcohol, as Bruce was talking about. So wanting to drink, having a desire to drink is a natural function of what's going on in your brain because of these changes that have happened. So the fact that you like that about this treatment is totally normal. The fact that you like that you don't have to quit drinking is totally normal because the brain is still very much addicted to the reward from the alcohol. Now, as you progress through the treatment, you might find that you like drinking less and that you're choosing not to drink as much. And that's just kind of a progression of what to expect through TSM. But I just felt led to say that because I think that's come up recently in our program where people feel guilty that they're still drinking on this treatment. But if you're doing the protocol correctly, taking the medication correctly, working on the habits and mindset and things like that, it's going to continue to work for you over time because your brain isn't getting the same reward reinforcement, and it will unlearn alcohol as a premium reward. So it's okay to like that about the treatment. I just want to say that, and try not to beat yourself up or feel guilty for that fact. Thanks, everybody. Any final words from you, Bruce?
Two things that I always say at the end of everything. Please know that whichever road you take, if it's TSM, alcohol, AUD, alcohol dependency today is completely treatable, treatable. And number two, no matter who or what or where someone has told you that it's your fault, alcohol addiction dependency is not your fault. What we do under the influence is to a degree our responsibility. So it doesn't give us justification to do certain things, but the actual addiction itself is not your fault. It's a neurological medical condition. It's not a character shortfall. It's not a personality shortfall. It's not you being a bad mother, a bad husband, a bad wife, a bad father. In my opinion, it's been misdiagnosed for many years, not because of negligence, but because of we don't have the medical understanding. Today, as page 32 says, thank you, Lowell, science has found that today there is a treatment for it. So just do the research.
Yeah. I feel like the real us is the one that's saying, why do I keep drinking in this way? Why am I doing that to my family? Like, I want to get this issue under control. That's the real us. But there's an unconscious version that's been impacted and essentially hijacked by the alcohol addiction. And that happens just by repeatedly drinking. Yes, we choose to drink and put the alcohol up to our mouth, but the brain changes by doing that. And if anybody's like me, I had no idea how alcohol addiction happened, and that I was just training my brain to become addicted to it. So we can start this in such a dark place, feeling a lot of shame and guilt and all of that. But certainly part of this healing is kind of breaking free from that mindset, because if we feel shame, maybe we're going to want to drink to mask that. If we feel guilty, it's going to stress us out, we're going to want to drink. We really have to start treating ourselves kindly and with respect. And that's a process as well. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for joining. We're beyond the top of the hour, but this has been an amazing conversation. I appreciate everyone who's here. If you're in the UK and you're looking for specialized Sinclair Method support, please reach out to Bruce Rose and his team at rethinkdrink.co.uk. And thank you to our Thrive members who joined this call. And if you're not yet a member, you can learn more about our at-home program for TSM at thrivealcoholrecovery.com.